Really has been a while. Nice to be back at the loading screen. Wait, what is that? Oh, come on. I haven't been gone that long. Well, it has been a minute. I've been distracted with quite a few other games recently, and I'll be making videos on the ones I suggest that people try out. Never I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't voice my thoughts and review the most recent season of Hero Siege, Season 7. I played Season 7 quite a bit in its first week before swapping over to Path of Exile like many other players did, and then a few weeks after that came back for a blood pack to enjoy the game to its fullest. Well, for the most part. So today we're going to be going over the cat review of Hero Siege Season 7. Little disclaimer here, I'm just a cat, and this is just my opinion. If at any point any of my criticism or anything I say makes you think I don't love this game with my whole heart, then you're very wrong. I adore Hero Siege. Everything I say is in service of it being better and more popular in the future and growing as a game. And I will say, despite my love for it, I've been asked to remain as impartial as possible when I do review these things. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the good and the bad of each of these things that I go over. And while the bad may sometimes seem a little longer than the good, don't get me wrong, there's just more to talk about when it's criticism. Glazing's always easier and quicker to do. And there is a lot to like about this season. A lot of things I really enjoyed and things that I think put the game in the right direction. So start off with Chaos Pillars. This was one of the big parts of the season update. Chaos Pillars were a very interesting mechanic, wherein pretty much the majority of zones, and later buffed to be in all zones, were Chaos Pillars. They had rarities just like items, and as you reached beyond the magic rarity, they required a Chaos Key. Early game, they were either a few mobs to kill that could drop cool items, or a bloater pack giving you 8 to 10 levels and jettisoning you up in power, letting you blast through the rest of the act. There's a very wide swingy variety of power that you get from them, and late game they offered things like boss parts, satanic drops, materials, and obviously more bloaters for hero levels, even going so far as to drop boss souls when inferno difficulty, and also sometimes Sheep King set pieces, which I don't think was intended. Gas Pillars is a mechanic, especially after the buff patch to them, making them drop more loot and spawn more often. Big thumbs up for me. If I had thumbs. Pillars were really cool. They not only start right out the gate, which I always think is good for seasonal mechanics, but they could offer various levels of power, be it if you got an early item or some nice loot explosions, or that bloater pack I talked about. This was a genuinely fun and interesting thing to engage with, and it opened options for endgame farming that finally took us out of our cave in 3-3 between satanic zones. Gave us good open world options for farming and optimizing zones. Late game and Inferno Pillars dropping boss souls was a very interesting choice, and I like it because it meant something other than endlessly killing bosses and farming parts. If you wanted to fight Gabriel or get souls for your friends, this was a good way to do it. I think breaking up monotony in a game and allowing players more agency and avenues to approach a mechanic is a good choice. I'll never fight against that. That's always great to me. Overall, I love this mechanic, and I'm sure it's going to stick around. Most likely not as nearly as powerful as it was, but I do hope it retains some of its sudden windfalls and spikes, as it always made my eyes dart over on the screen when I saw the little icon on my map. That was always a hold your breath moment to see how crazy the pillar was or what rarity it was. My only suggestion for improvement on Chaos Pillars is that the icon gets changed, but I think this is getting changed in Season 8. I just haven't looked at the patch notes enough yet. The other one is maybe removing the Satanic Crystal Shard drops. I don't like those as a drop option at all. You get like maybe 10 to 20 of them, but you need so many of them to make a single crystal that it just feels like a kind of a waste, and it spams your loot window. But probably one of my favorite mechanics. The next change we got in the season were bosses. We got some new bosses, so to speak. Sheep King being a returning boss who was turned into an actual full-on Uber boss in a way. He's got new mechanics, new abilities, and he has drop rates on the Sheep King set. We got the Rogue Chaos Tower, a boss available in the Codex of Chaos, which was a moving tower using several tower mechanics and dropping valuable new pairs of boots. And Indrixia, a boss added to Ruby Garden with her own loot table, offering up some neat and powerful items and making Ruby Keys have some more value, giving a bit more life to a somewhat stagnant zone that was just full of chests that you would loot and then leave. New bosses are always a nice thing to see in any new content in a game. People should have more and more pinnacle content to test their builds on or stack damage to push the numbers and have a good time, for the most part. Putting more new items behind them as well creates good chase and gives people a reason to hunt them down. This is made even better with Inferno, with having specific items locked behind it, so players are more incentivized to gear up and approach bosses on their highest difficulties. So let's talk about the bosses and how I felt about them. Sheep King's mechanics are right on point. They're just the level of goofy and macabre you'd expect from the game, especially in Sheeponia. But, much like the Chaos Tower, which I'll repeat when I get to that part, you should not have rare monster affixes appearing on these. Finding bloating or fallen angel or things that vastly increase their HP or their damage reduction is really annoying. If there's something to be said about killing them too quick, just increase their base HP. And as far as Sheep King goes, the mechanics are fine. The problem is he goes immune when using his Apocalypse ability. This means you're just kind of standing there doing nothing, and it feels really lame and boring, especially if you got one of those mentioned affixes and has a billion HP. You're going through many of these phases and just standing there kind of twiddling your thumbs. I know removing the immunity on this would make it so you just kill him while he's doing it, but there should probably be a better solution than just standing there AFK. It's not engaging gameplay. Chaos Tower I like a lot. He's got a really interesting way to approach a codex, and it's pretty fun to dash around yourself with friends seeing if he spawned. I do think the real estate sometimes is limited in maps, but that's just kind of the nature of codexes, and you do choose the codex you do them on, so it's kind of your fault if you limit yourself in space. His mechanics are cool, and they're stylish, and they match what he is, a rogue Chaos Tower. Same problem though as the Sheep King, and that is the ability to get monster affixes at random. I don't think this should happen. Doubling, quadrupling his HP, kinda dumb. And the damage reduction is annoying to deal with. Both these bosses having the ability to get these affixes feels like almost an oversight, like it was just like something missed, and I think that's why it feels so bad. And then let's talk about Indrixia. I like Indrixia. I think she's a really cool, interesting encounter. Her mechanics are neat, they're very fitting, she's very thematic, and it's a dragon. Dragons are cool in RPGs. Problem being, Indrixia has an insane amount of HP and built-in damage reduction. Built-in damage reduction that made a 6 billion DPS character go down to 1 billion DPS on her while dodging all her abilities. This was a character that could do full damage while moving due to the aimbot trinket. It's kind of strange to see a boss get this much HP and this much damage reduction combined, and it almost feels like a huge, screw you guys, here's the tankiest thing in the game. Which I get, it's kind of annoying to have all the mechanics of your bosses skipped by people doing a ton of damage, and if you want people's damage to be lower, you just need to lower their damage and not make bosses that are so disgustingly tanky. If you want Indrixia to be the pinnacle of all things and the hardest and strongest thing in the game, or the hardest thing to do damage to, then maybe advertise it that way. As it stands, this fight is boring. It's not fun to do because it takes so long. The only build that can do it in a good amount of time is something in the best gear absolutely possible, and even then, it's usually a build like the Bard build that does insane amounts of damage this season. I did this fight multiple times, and every time I was kind of bored. The mechanics aren't hard to dodge, but after you do them for 4 minutes straight, depending on what you're playing, it gets miserable. I did this fight on 2-player health, and my friend died, and I ended up doing the fight for 12 minutes until I killed it. And I should have just died instead, because it was a waste of my time. Her items are good, but they're not good enough for me to waste as much time on them. Maybe in a trade environment I could see doing it, but damn, it's brutal. Ideally, either her damage reduction gets lowered, or her health gets lowered, or a combination of the both, or just, anything to make her less annoying to fight. I understand having a challenging boss, but the challenge shouldn't be their overwhelming HP, and that's really all it is because their mechanics are simple. I do like the mechanics on all the bosses though. They are well telegraphed and easy to understand what they do and how to avoid them, so I don't think there needs to be any change to those. They're really cool as is, and they are punishing if you get hit by them. And now we move on to the Bard. It was probably the paramount of the season for many people, especially people who've been playing the game for a long time. Brings a lot of excitement to someone who wants to try something new, especially veterans. Personally, I haven't played the Bard yet, but many people I know have. It's a funny way to approach the tired old trope of a Bard. It being a metal rocker with a full-on Kiss-style face paint and abilities themed after metal music is stylishly perfect for Hero Siege and very on point for the style they have, and very on point for the game. It does look pretty fun to play, and each different skill tree seems to offer entirely different ways to play the game. Thematically, it's awesome. I'll probably be trying it sometime before Season 8 or during Season 8 just to put it on the roster of classes I've played. I also know it's got a build that's extremely powerful, so that's a plus for most people. In the new season, we also got plenty of new items and new item changes, and this means old items getting updated. The new bosses not only got their new items, but old items got reworks. Some bad items actually got buffed to be pretty good, and some good items actually got better. Well, several new things that just drop in specific locations, like the challenge dungeon items with chaotic dice and kodos. And these are very different and new items with unique effects. Item changes are something I'm always happy to see. A lot of items that needed some love got it, and existing good items actually got a lot more powerful, which is kind of cool sometimes too. Item changes like these are something I'm always happy to see. I don't like when ARPGs just brush over their items that are terrible and remain that way for years. And we all know what those items are, and we know the ARPGs they're in because we see them drop and we sigh. I'm looking at Belt of Wealth right now because I hate that item, if you haven't noticed from watching my videos. One thing I will say about item this season is I do think there's still a little too many heroics that just have no usage, and I think the star system back in Season 5 was a really good way to take heroics that are bad and give them some use. Though I don't think the perfect answer to heroics that are bad is to just make them dustable to upgrade heroics that are good, because at that point, just don't have the heroics that are bad. I do understand there's niche use cases for some of these, and I'm sure very early on in seasons or in SSF, there are ways you can utilize them. But the matter of the fact is they do still need their own rework. Speaking of item reworks, ailment damage. Let's talk about that. This was the first pass at ailment damage and making some kind of dot-based builds or working off ailments in the game, and I would say it didn't go great. I don't know if Hero Siege is really in a state where ailment damage is something that's going to exist, or where a dot build or damage over time build can really function well, but I'm happy to be proven wrong in the future, as dot builds and damage over time builds are my favorite kind in most games. I really enjoy playing them, and I always look for one the moment I start a new ARPG or RPG, and I'm always disappointed when they don't work well. I think the main issue issue I found was so many items had ailment damage put on them and it just felt like a wasted stat, especially ones that had other lines on them replaced by it. Hopefully in the future something's done to make it better, and I'm really looking forward to that if so. I mentioned Chaos Walkers earlier, and these items, I don't know how they got through testing. The fact that they scale damage based on every ailment is really crazy, and it once again put a huge gap between Fizz and casters, as physical gamers could just stack that element on a jewel or on a charm and apply it with an attack, meaning they just basically quadruple their damage, since the effect is a more modifier. Ideally, we don't see any items like this in the future, as it's really unfun to have there be an item so brokenly overpowered that basically every class in the game wants it. This kind of goes for the combo of autos and kodos as well, which is a domineering thing this season, but that interaction's a little harder to pull off because one's an angelic, so I'll give that kind of a pass. But overall, item balance is getting better. More new and cool items are getting added. I can't really complain. Well, let's talk about class balance. Class changes were good to see this season. Well, there's still plenty to talk about. I think they're getting to a better place. Strong classes from Season 6 didn't get blasted into complete uselessness and remained pretty strong. Several others were brought up in line with them to be close enough. This is the kind of balance I like to see. I think the Necromancer Hell Stack's a great example. It's a build that's extremely strong early, but hits a ceiling where it needs a lot of gear. My favorite build to suggest to new players because it's easy to play and requires very little thought about your stats until you start pushing really high endgame. It might still be a little too powerful and a little too easy to gear, but I think it's a good example to use for where to bring other classes to or around the area you want them in. Several classes did come up in power. I personally got to enjoy Paladin, Pirate, and White Mage all the way up through Inferno and all the Inferno Uber bosses. And in the future, I do hope to see more of this kind of balancing, where things at the top come down maybe 10% and things at the bottom go up 50 to 60% or whatever it takes to get them there. A really good RPG has very different metrics for most played class every season because that's how you shake up a meta and keep people interested. I also don't like when an RPG takes what's strong and stomps it into uselessness for several seasons. I think that should be avoided. What I will say about class balance is I do want to keep seeing it go in this direction in the future, and there's a lot of classes that aren't so great. I will definitely say here that this is a controversial opinion, but I would like to see less focus on throwing a million new mechanics into a season and more focus on making classes viable. Does Jotun still suck? That would be my main question. And yes, I know no class in Hero Siege truly sucks. I'm actually the champion of saying that every class in the game is fully viable depending on gear. The difference between an S tier and D tier, or if you're looking at a tier list class in Hero Siege, is literally just how much gear does it take to do X. And yes, many are going to break levels of damage others are just not capable of, but everything can do everything with enough gear and time investment. The only difference between those tiers of classes is how much gear and time it takes to get there. The problem is some of them are just so off the charts bad for that, and they don't even feel good to play when you get that gear. I'd like to see more focus on developing those classes and really touching on what's bad about them and how to bring them up before we start adding 100 new things to the game. And when I say class balance, I'm also talking about classes having more than one viable ability. That would be a really nice change as well. And I know that's a lot of dev stuff to ask and a lot of dev time to ask, but it's definitely something I'd like to see, in my opinion. Let's talk about a lot of good QoL things, and the best of them being the maid skins. Yeah, I mean, those are awesome, but actually the best thing was the sub-skill nodes. The major augment sub-skill nodes being now available starting at level 40, down from 60 in Season 6. This is something I had hoped for and mentioned in my last video, and easily one of my favorite changes overall. This massively increased the quality of life for many classes in the game and made the Nightmare to Hell endgame push smoother for many players. It's everything I wanted to assist with making certain classes feel better earlier. Seeing feedback like this get implemented always gives you a warm fuzzy feeling in your little feline heart. Class cooldowns getting reset on zone change is another awesome thing that I really enjoyed, not only for tackling progression but for farming, and it's an amazing thing depending on your class. Stash changes where you can rearrange and rename tabs are absolutely lovely. Boss waypoints. Now that's a change I actually thought I wouldn't see, but this is one I give massive props to. I really want to see Hero Siege keep going in a direction where they look at something like this and adopt a mentality of this would be good for new players or struggling players or anybody experiencing frustration. I think a lot of communities like the one in Hero Siege or games like this with dedicated fan bases that are a little smaller have kind of an old player mentality of, oh, I've been here since the start, just get good. And you need to shake that off. You have to realize that some people don't enjoy a walk of shame or frustration, and it's not about instant gratification or low attention spans, it's about just time. A lot of people are going to get frustrated with difficult bosses and going in blind to a game, and not everybody has a handhold or a guide, and not everybody's playing a class that's going to blast through stuff. Adding these waypoints is a clear stance showing that there is some new player friendliness being added to the QoL. And hell, even experienced players are going to die to these bosses sometimes. It just happens, especially when playing new classes. I do it all the time, but I'm also a cat, and you're better than a cat at video games, aren't you? The Chaos Tower dropping more fragments based on difficulty was also a great change. I basically avoided it entirely last season because of how hard fragments were to get, but with this and the Chaos Pillars being able to drop fragments, I actually got to enjoy the Rackle fight from time to time. Pairing this with buffs to other pieces like Primeval parts, battle fragments, dimensional shards, and all the boss souls made approaching the Gabriel fight much easier and more accessible as well. On the topic of boss fight farming and pieces, the Amun-Ra fight still takes an immense amount of farming to get to, and I'd love to see some reduction or some ways to increase the speed at which you obtain scrolls, especially in a GSF or SSF environment. And this will bring me to my next topic, because we had a lot of trouble with this in my Blood Pact. Blood Pacts are a personal favorite, if you know me. I love the Blood Pact system. It's one of my favorite community events that we started in Season 6. We dub it the Paw Pact, and we have a great time. This season was no different, but Blood Pact's got a lot of great additions. Tons of new sliders that helped a lot of issues presented in a GSF environment that we experienced in Season 6. It allowed us to tune more drop rates on more items. We also got something I asked for directly in my video, which was larger Blood Pack sizes. 50, 100, 250. Big person Blood Packs. I actually launched 2 250 person Blood Packs this season, one shortly after season launch, which reached 238 active players, and another one several weeks later with around 180 active players. It was a lot of fun. Blood Packs are still one of the best ways to enjoy the game with a smaller, more collective community, and they let you do some really cool things. I adore Blood Packs, and every bit of QoL they get is always a massive plus for me. But this didn't come free of problems. And I'm going to go over those right now, and these are going to kind of be my laundry list of Blood Pact issues. Now, I'm going to say this right away. A lot of the issues I'm going to go over, and I'll highlight this when I get to them, they kind of only affect someone like me running a large Blood Pact. And I don't have the statistics on how many people run large Blood Pacts. It's probably not that many. And I feel bad asking for development time on something that really only affects a minority or my group. But large Blood Packs are very difficult to manage, and we'll get to that. The main thing I want to talk about is Blood Pact Chat. Blood Pact Chat was in the patch notes for Season 7, and I was absolutely hyped. It was a feature sorely missing from Blood Pacts that we were desperate to have. And we didn't get it. And it's not in the patch notes for Season 8. When we asked about it, a feature that we thought we were going to have and were not told that we wouldn't get, we were just met with, we didn't have time. Which didn't feel great, especially when I was willing to shell out plenty of money just to play a Blood Pact with several people. And I know I'm not spending thousands of dollars, but this is probably the most sought after feature of Blood Pacts other than the ones I'll name after. As it stands, if Blood Pact Chat doesn't get added to Season 8, I'm probably just not going to open a Blood Pact. And that sucks, because I love opening them and I love playing with my community, but not having them is really awful and just feels bad. And at this point, it is just kind of unfortunate and feels hurtful that we were just told we would get it and didn't. And yeah, I know the financial loss of me not opening a couple Blood Packs probably isn't enough for them to divert all their dev power to fixing this, but I just feel really sad that we didn't get it because it took a lot of the wind out of our sails after being so excited for so long. And to get no warning about it felt even worse. On top of this, Blood Pacts could really use some complete reorganization of how their admin controls exist. And like I said, this is probably an issue more for larger packs, as when you're running a smaller pack, maybe with a small amount of friends, this isn't an issue. But let's talk about some things. The interface for the actual Blood Pact window is not super great. It has no admin control, no log, nothing. When you invite someone, they can just invite anyone else, and you have no idea if they did unless you scroll through the list. I think the UI needs a bit of an overhaul, maybe the ability to invite more than one ID at a time, which is a small ask, but I think it needs a log showing you who's invited and who left and when. I think it would also be a great thing if you could have the ability to promote officers and only they could invite and kick people as well. It'd also be really good if they could do that before the Blood Pact is activated so you could have help getting everybody in. Once again, this is for larger packs, but I think it'd be a good idea to have some admin controls and logging because this would also incentivize people to open up little fun challenge packs or things with other people and make sure that people aren't just inviting whoever. Also, currently you can't kick someone out of a Blood Pact. If you try, it just re-adds them automatically. And that's a big problem because I had to try to kick people out of my Blood Pact this season for some reasons, and I couldn't, and that was super awkward. I guess lucky there was no chat for them to spam. And speaking of the admin side, let's talk about the stash. Let's talk about item sharing in Blood Pacts. This is a nightmare because it uses the same guild stash that only one person can be in at a time. Once again, small player base in a Blood Pact might not be an issue. You get to over 50 people or even at 30, you're going to start having problems. In my case, when it was over 180 to 250, well, it was unusable. And what happens when it's unusable and there's a bunch of people trying to use it? Well, only one person can be in, but when other people try to get in, it bugs out and tells them that they're in and deletes their items. Not great. I understand this is a technical limitation, but if we could get at least some admin control on it, that might help a little bit. Even though I will tell you the stash is not big enough for a large player base, I think being able to lock certain slots and label them would help a lot. Maybe the same thing where you promote people to officer in the Blood Pact and only they can access certain tabs, removing and adding things. Our way around it was to create an entire trading forum on my Discord, which worked out pretty well, but isn't ideal because it's out of game. So not everybody engages with it. Once again, I know this takes a lot of dev power, so I don't expect it to be something that gets implemented. And I know know there's a big technical limitation over how these stashes work, and the only other solutions I have to offer, I'm sure, are an even bigger technical limitation and something they don't want to do. I know things like the actual market itself run off their own server, but it'd be kind of cool if there was an option to like rent your own market server or something. I'm sure larger blood packs would be down for that, just to make item distribution easier. I sure would. I just don't know the amount of money or what kind of dev time that would take. Other than that, the only ask I have for blood packs is please give us a shared stash for our characters. You can't share items in your stash. They're all personal for your own characters. So whenever you want to transfer stuff to a new character, you have to have some poor soul stand there and pick it all up for you and then drop it again later. I'd really like to eliminate that part, as making alts and blood packs is one of the funnest things to do, especially when the EXP rate's juiced. But now that my rant about blood packs is over, let's get on to some other things. We can talk about the launch itself, which I actually thought was a lot better than Season 6. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but people are just going to be unhappy about these launches no matter what, because they're always marred with connection issues, and I feel like most people who have played Hero Siege for a long time should just be used to that. I've only actively played on 3 season launches now, and at this point I just kind of like get it. It just makes sense. It's gonna happen, and I just don't care. And granted, I vent my frustration, and I'm sure I was bitching up a storm on my stream about getting disconnected, but at no point was I just like vehemently mad and ripping into them in all caps on Discord, which is a crazy thing to do. And hopefully the devs just don't respond to that kind of thing. Just avoid it, as I know that can't be good for your mental health, and these people are crazy. But the reality is, these launch issues are just gonna happen. I would love to see in the future if it gets better, but it does seem to be. I will tell anyone who didn't play Season 6, this was a better launch. The issues were resolved faster. And yeah, they suck, and they were a little worse because you kept having to re-level because we kept getting rollbacks, but they were region-based crashes and they were just gonna happen. And I can say with confidence, I see the launches getting better in the future. And then for a subject I wasn't sure I wanted to put in this video, but I really should mention it as it had a lot to do with the season. You see, Season 7 launched with a pretty significant loot nerf as for how many heroics and things were dropping, and a lot of people noticed this instantly, including myself. I streamed 24 hours straight, and in that time I dropped a single heroic, and that was on the 23rd hour of streaming. It felt like there was nothing dropping, and that was a sentiment mirrored by many people. Even checking the market, I noticed a severe lack of items. And yes, the early 1 to 2 day rush of the auction house is pretty sparse, but never this bad in my experience. The result of this was a 25% loot buff on heroics and SS tier satanics, and this seemed okay at first, and we did start getting drops after that. This was all due to the fact that people around the Discord kind of bitching their brains out about it, and it did have an effect where we did get a buff, though it also did create some really awkward interactions that I was sent screenshots of that I didn't really enjoy seeing, and some opinions I'm not really sure I agree with. But the fact is, loot was increased a little bit, and that helped. And then the next day it was increased vastly. 72.5% on heroic and SS satanics, tweaking of the tier rolls for SS drops, ancient monster drops and legion monster drop rolls being buffed, meaning more loot overall. Now, you could argue that this was fun, and this was fine. People seem to like loot raining. People want that instant dopamine and instant gratification. I'm not necessarily one of those people, as I don't mind a grind, but definitely what the season launched as was not okay. The problem with this is that goblin codexes are still in the game, and at the time, and this is basically information I'm getting from how the patch notes changed, they were in an unnerfed state from Season 6. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but the patch notes look like they were redoing the nerf they were supposed to do from Season 6 to 7. I know this because I was running Goblin Codexes on the second day with a group of people, and we were printing heroics and angelics, and this was before the 72.5% increase in drops. We dropped 5 angelics in about 3 hours, as well as dozens if not 100 plus heroics. So the loot was still there, especially after the initial buff. And then we got this additional buff. And what did this cause? The value of almost every heroic in the game outside of the top tier extremely rare ones plummeted down to about 1 to 5,000 gold within 72 hours of the game reaching its new season. This made an economy that nobody really wanted to participate in and caused me to go spin up a blood pact a week earlier than I had planned to. Because most of my community and many people were reaching out to me and saying they didn't know what to do and they weren't having fun. And while yes, heroics do lose their value over time with supply and demand, this was expedited vastly. This loot buff is what I can only describe as, fuck you, here's your cake, gorge yourself. I understand the extreme pressure and the annoyance and irritation of your entire community bitching their minds out in your general chat and XDD chatting at you constantly trying to get your attention and make you do things that they want so that they can get instant gratification. But the way this was handled just didn't feel great. It didn't feel great to me, and it didn't feel great to a lot of people I know, and it kind of made trade not fun for us. If I'd kept playing it, I'm sure I would have still had fun, as I still know how to make money outside of just heroic drops, as I've pointed out in many of my videos, and it wasn't an issue for me. I was really plush with cash already even prior to doing Goblin Codexes. A few of the problems this loot buff created was not only did Goblin Codexes get affected, but because of the increased drop rates of SS items, while the orbs needed to do Goblin Codexes would self-sustain in those codexes. Combine this with the fact that Pacts did an excellent job in handling any cheaters or exploits, and the new anti-cheat system seems to be working. So gold inflation wasn't really a thing at the time. But the fact is, with both gold values being relatively normal and stable, well, what happened? Well, the thing is, when you take 3 to 4 people into a goblin codex and you just reset and kill goblins, you make a lot of gold. In fact, we were making 450 to 500,000 gold per goblin codex. And do you know what it costs to run a goblin codex? About 1 million gold, which we split between 3 or 4 people. So we were profiting just in raw gold. And then you add in all the heroics and angelics we were dropping. And by the way, this was prior to the loot buff of 72.5. This is only after the first one. After that, it became very silly how much we were getting. And you could just look at the chat at any point during the day and you could see how many items were dropping for multiple people. The reality is, this kind of thing, it expedited the tanking of the economy. And the economy is always tanking ARPGs. It just happens, especially with a smaller player base. The smaller player base you have, the faster an economy is going to go downhill and the faster things are going to get out of control. But there was no need to make it this quick. It felt like a very knee-jerk reaction, and like I said, it felt like a very, here, go ahead, do whatever you want kind of reaction, which I get. I'm sure it was annoying dealing with it, and I'm sure people were blowing it out of proportion how bad the loot was. And you know what? It's not like you can beta test for these kind of things that easily. You don't have that amount of beta testers out there, and you're not testing for mob drop rates. You're testing mechanics and bugs. So this kind of thing can slip through pretty easily. The fact of the matter is, it just kind of put a damper feeling on the whole thing and made a lot of people flood away from the game a little quicker than they might have. And that's really unfortunate for the season. Overall, we were probably on pace to have a really good economy if we had just gotten the first loot buff. Or, and I'm going to say the controversial thing here, which I fully believe and have believed since Season 6, remove Goblin Codexes from the game entirely. They're not good for the game, and I don't think there's a satisfying point for them, because either they're nerfed to the point where nobody ever runs them, or they're just good enough to where they're the best way to get items in the game. And I don't think any mechanic in the game should print loot the way they do. It's too easy. It definitely needs a higher barrier of entry, more difficulty, a higher challenge, and it shouldn't be able to be split between 4 people so easily. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that love Goblin Codexes, but I think they're just toxic for the game, because when all roads lead to one mechanic to print the items you want, it really takes away from the value of chasing things, or random drops, or anything fun. The fact is, there's never going to be a perfect solution to this kind of thing, as there's always going to be one best strat to create wealth or get items. There's no avoiding that, and with as many new mechanics as they try to add every season, or the things they try to do to keep the game fresh and exciting, yeah, it's just gonna happen. But this one's been a problem for a while, and I don't think there's a case where you can get it down to a satisfying point for everyone. Though I haven't seen the Season 8 iteration of it yet, so I have no idea where it's at. On top of this, the Clown Flag cosmetic was added to the game as almost a direct fuck you to the player base, or at least the ones that were participating in all the complaining and whining. This seemed immature and surprising to me, and it was very funny in a haha I can't believe they did that way, and less of a haha got 'em way. I mean, I get it, fuck them, especially those people that are just XD chatting at you and saying really toxic stuff in your Discord. But I think the answer to that is to step away from the public facing Discord and look at things internally instead of airing laundry out in front of everyone or directly putting a hostile cosmetic in that calls your players clowns. I know it wasn't directed at me, but it still felt a little awkward to see it put in the game. Imagine that was you on the player side. At the end of the day, while you may have a dedicated community, you have to keep in mind that not everyone's been here for a long time and not everyone's experienced with in-jokes, or whatever this might have been. In hindsight, I've been able to make plenty of jokes about it, so maybe it was a positive. Either way, I think you should just protect your mental health and probably start ignoring a lot of the people that chat in there, because if it starts affecting the kind of things you put into the game, it could eventually be a problem. And trust me, I love that you have personal interaction and engagement with your player base on the daily in your community. Hell, you guys have even had it with me, and it's been awesome. You've been really nice and really enjoyable to talk to. But if it ever gets to the point where you're adding in things like that to the game as a reactionary measure, maybe it is time to take a step back and just avoid dealing with everybody for a little bit while you focus on development. Because at the end of the day, the game being good is all that's really going to matter. Not that I'm saying not to listen to community feedback and when people are having problems. I do think a reaction of buffing the loot in the first place was a good idea because loot was in a bad state. I'm just not sure about the second loot buff, the magnitude of it, or the response afterwards. Either way, I think if we had avoided that second loot buff or Goblin Codexes didn't exist, the economy would have been in a much better state. However, with the new anti-cheat systems and everything they're doing to fight exploiters, I do see a really prospective future for an economy. I think Season 8 has the chance to be a really solid economy that is free of exploits and problems, and I'm excited for that. At the end of the day, though, I haven't even gotten a chance to really look at a lot of the Season 8 patch notes. I've heard things here and there, but I haven't really gone over them, and my next video is most likely going to be me reviewing them and talking about my thoughts on them. Season 7 itself was really fun. I did enjoy my time with it. I enjoyed my blood packs, and I enjoyed playing with all the community that I really enjoy. I enjoyed trade and talking to people about it. I wish the economy had stayed the same way it was in the first 2 days, because it actually felt really good, and I hope the next season's economy can do the same same thing, because it's really fun to play in a stable economy on this game. I think Hero Siege has one of the best setups for a good economy, with having such a good auction house and some really cool ways to handle item drops and loot, and I think it has some of the best party play in existence, and some of the best farming. Overall, I do see Season 7 as a success, and a step up for the game in a lot of ways. It definitely improved on some of the things in Season 6 I didn't enjoy, and here's hoping to see more of that in the future. Once again, this is all just the opinion of a humble cat bitching on the internet in YouTube videos. And if you somehow think I don't love the game, well, I have a clown flag I could interest you in. Anyway, I'm Sleepy Cat, and I'm tired. Good night.